Building a great company is a marathon, not a sprint. Each week, Krista Inkeman and the team at Tank New Media take on growth challenges, explore technology, and interview business leaders that are always upping their game. If you're ready to build scalable systems to drive your business forward, this podcast is for you.
Hi, everyone. Today I'm here with Taylor Kack. She has been helping companies with their marketing since 2014, helping them communicate their stories and their Xfactors, which is what we're going to be talking today. So welcome, Taylor.
Hi.
Nice to have you here.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
So tell me, what are we talking about when we say story or brand story?
Yeah, I think when we get to the core of it, when we say story or brand story, we're really talking about who you are as a company, why your business exists, and ultimately, what differentiates you from others in the marketplace. I think it's really like a narrative about facts and feelings about what your company is trying to communicate to your audience, and ultimately the whole entire reason your company exists. I think it really embodies that experience your audience has when they're interacting with you and your business.
Okay, so tell me about what an Xfactor is.
Yeah, so an Xfactor really hits home on what your company uses to set themselves apart. So it adds that intangible value to a product or service. It really is the way that your company is going to add value to your customers, and then ultimately how you can consistently and consciously continue to add that standard of value to them.
Okay. So what might be like an example of a company that does this really well?
Gosh, so I think they're kind of a brand titan, and it's easy to kind of see how Apple sets themselves apart from kind of their competition. They sell computers, but ultimately they're focused on delivering that unique experience. Why can they change the status quo and think differently and really provide that level of experience to their customers rather than just selling them a computer?
Sure.
You don't see their marketing really saying like,
buy a computer now.
Yeah, here's a phone, like here's a cool phone. Like that's ultimately what they're doing, but they really try to hit home on, how they can get their customers to think differently.
So why is this so important for companies to invest time to really figure out what their X factor is?
I think it goes back to that idea that this is truly what sets you apart from your competitors, and it ultimately adds value to your audience. So an example I've heard in the past that's kind of humorous, but it really kind of hits home is if you hear that, Superman was just some guy running around in tights, to me, I don't think it makes any sense. Seems a little weird, to be honest. And, if you can hear his story and why he is who he is, what makes him different from Batman or Iron Man, it starts to give the people something they can relate to and something they can buy into. And then at that point, you truly do have a story and an experience that your audience can really buy into and relate to and continue to build loyalty. So your brand's no different, Maybe you're not selling tights or wearing tights, hopefully, but you're really trying to get that value for your customer and keep them being loyal to you and your brand.
Yeah, I love that example because it seems like everybody's got their favorite superhero, and maybe it goes back to who they relate to and why.
Yeah.
My 3-year-old personally, he loves Batman. He doesn't want to have anything to do with anybody else.
No one else exists.
No one else
why?
exists, just Batman. So I love that example because I think everybody can kind of relate to that because I think everybody's kind of got their favorite.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to why they're your favorite.
Yeah,
it's
I never thought about it that way.
It maybe on the surface it may seem like, yeah, Batman's, dark and at night and cool, but ultimately it's a different experience when you're interacting with each different one. So it really goes back to the why you have the value.
Absolutely. So it seems like this is a bit of a process for I can imagine it'd be a bit of a process for a company, trying to figure out what their X factor is and how to communicate it. So So let's just talk a little bit about, what it really does for a company. So what is some of the value of really having this X factor figured out?
Yeah, I think ultimately it's that connection point. It lets you have a way into your audience. It gives them a way into understanding who you are and what you're trying to do and how you're trying to bring value to them. Because, if you don't add to my day-to-day life or my story in any kind of way, why am I going to care?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's kind of what it comes down to. And it's not so much of a give and take, but I think if you can't provide any kind of value or any kind of insight or differentiator, it's very hard to be able to get your foot in the door. So I really think it's that opportunity to create a touch point with a customer and just really sell them into, this is how we can make a difference, and let's work together to figure out how you can provide that value for them.
Do you feel like that's really become more important? I feel like I hear more about this lately than I used to.
Yeah, I really think anything you hear anymore is just even the human aspect, right? Mm-hmm. We're spending, ink reports that you're spending 4 hours a day on your phone, and it's only going to increase. People are constantly moving. They're constantly on their phones. Their attention spans are shorter. Like, you have to be able to provide that value up front and let them see that, you really do have something that can improve or add value to their, day to day.
And it seems like just, in that same vein, if you're going to say that you're delivering a certain value or you're doing something, it seems like it'd be just as important to make sure you're actually delivering on that.
Yeah, and it has to be accurate. So, if you can't commit to it or it doesn't fit what you're actually trying to do, people are going to be aware. It's not going to take them very long to figure out, okay, I don't know if this is what they're standing for. And I think along with that, it's important to remember that it's easy for brands to think that they have to cherry pick this story or it has to be this best version of themselves. And I don't know that that's necessarily true. I think a lot of our stories and our X factors are built on experiences that maybe were a pitfall or, we had to kind of climb a mountain to get there. And I think it's important that you kind of share some of those details. It gives you the street cred. It gives you the authority to be
Well, it's real.
Yeah. It gives you that authority that you can stand where you're standing. And again, I hate to keep going back to it, but it gives somebody something to relate to. Like, okay, we experience those same, difficulties or pain points, and how can I overcome that or relate into it? I think helps give people kind of that insight into, okay, these people might get me, or, I can relate to them.
Well, it seems like at the end of the day, you're always doing business with people, even if it's a big brand, at the end of the day, you're hoping to have that relationship and build that relationship, which is, I think, really big, specifically with B2B. Stuff is moving more online. They're getting more information, but at the end of the day, like, people still want to have that relationship with the company and feel like they're, making a difference. I guess.
And I think on that point, if, you're getting these customers in that you're buying into, but if they're not accurate to who you really are, you now have this army of people who are out there.
Not
same. And if they're not, how you're thinking or really what you're needing for an advocate, like, then you've created this whole subset of, word of mouth, basically, that isn't related to what you're wanting. So it is really important to be accurate and honest and, always evolving. So what you were 10 years ago may not be where you are 15 years from now. So just making sure you're always evaluating that you're aligning with your audience and, moving through those stages of the journey is really important.
Absolutely. So we've kind of talked about, why it's important. Let's talk about how this happens, or, where should you really be communicating your X factor?
Yeah. So this isn't going to be like a really eloquent answer, but it's got to be everywhere.
Yeah.
Anything that you do, it's got to be those big ticket items like website content and advertising and, the immediate ones you always think about, but it's got to go all the way down into, the tone of your voicemail messages, the emails you're sending out and prospecting, and ultimately even your culture. So, your employees really need to buy into this and understand why they're existing within your business as well, because they're really going to communicate and buy into it and help advocate for you and your business as well.
Yeah, definitely. And something from Harvard Business Review is actually it takes 5 to 7 impressions to produce even a smidge of brand awareness. So it seems like the more you can have that message out there and have it be consistent, the better off you're going to be.
Exactly. And once you have that, it's easier for people to believe in something that you believe in.
Oh,
so
absolutely.
if you're implementing it everywhere, if it's in your social media, if it's in your, campaigns, it makes it easier for people to start digesting that information, and then relating it back to them and understanding why you are out there and what your message is.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So we like to try to give people some workable frameworks here on the show. So let's talk a little bit about how you really amplify your X factor to the world. What would kind of be a good systematic way that you would think about communicating this?
Yeah, so I think there's really 3 C's we can think about when we're going through and considering how we're going to amplify our X factor in the world. The first one I think is compelling. It goes back to it has to be accurate. It has to communicate why you're doing this and what makes you different. Again, I don't think it has to be you sell this super unique product or have a super secret service that can, solve all of the world's problems. Mm-hmm. It can be something like culture or mission or, something smaller, but it has to be meaningful and it has to make an impact. If you can hone in and make it super clear, and really concisely tell your audience what makes you different, I think that's kind of the first step in the process. And then following that, I think just making sure you're consistent. You're not telling your customers one thing in an email and something different on social media. Sure. People are in tune to that, and anymore people are really in tune. They're getting their information from a multitude of different places. So it's got to match. It's got to line up. I'm not saying regurgitate the same message on everything,
but have it follow the same values.
Yeah,
principles.
Have a core theme and follow back on that and really just make sure that you're following a consistent idea and reason why. Consistent branding increases revenue by 23%. So,
oh, wow. Yeah.
Inc.'s done some research around that. So it really does make an impact. And if you can't find a way to implement it in all aspects of your business, then it shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
So you have to be willing to put that into every facet of the business. And if it doesn't fit, then you need to reevaluate if it needs to be there in the first place. So that's kind of the second C, if you will. And then the final one is going to be channels. So I think just talking about your X factor and what makes you different on all channels is really important. I don't think it's the same as promoting yourself. I think there's a difference in being super salesy. It goes back to really communicating the why. So not I am better than you. I think you need to let your audience make that decision on their own to an extent. I think you really have to be conscious of communicating why you're better or why you can provide a better value or experience to them. I think it's looking at different areas that your customers or audience may be digesting information and making sure you're reaching out to them in that way. When you consider, we are going to say a company A is really innovative and forward thinkers, but then they're using these old school ways of communicating with people, that experience doesn't line up either. So you really have to be conscious of where you're reaching your audience, how you're reaching them, and what you're putting out, which seems like a lot, but if you can start here and there and start implementing all of those ideas, I think you'll start to really see how you can amplify your X factor out there.
Awesome. Well, Taylor, thank you so much for being with us today. And I look forward to having you back soon.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
This podcast is brought to you by Tank New Media, a digital marketing agency that has been generating marketing and sales traction for growth-minded B2B organizations since 2009.